Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is belonging. We have this innate drive to belong and be accepted and often turn ourselves inside out and upside down to achieve this state of belonging. Which is fleeting in many ways. Anyway, we get to discuss this and the impact of belonging on our self-acceptance and acceptance of others. Should be an interesting conversation. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. And welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Before we get started, let's take a minute or two to just get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, energizing all your cells, all your molecules, all your electrons, creating this brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together and very softly rub your fingers against your palms to feel the tickling, the tingling, that sensation. Allow yourselves to be present to that sensation. Feel the pressure against your palms and allow that presence to the sensation to bring you into this remarkable physical form, this amazing body that you have that enables you to experience life. And welcome. So today we're talking about belonging and what a profound drive it is. This topic came up for me yesterday when I met with a group of folks, and it turned out coincidentally that all of them were immigrants to this country. And it was so fascinating to be able to explore this, the wounds, the deep wounds of trying to assimilate to a different culture. And what struck me was that despite the richness of each of their stories and the pain that they suffered in trying to assimilate and acclimate, what struck me was that experience, although the stories were characterized by otherness, by coming into a new country and feeling the outsider as they came to a new country, what became very clear to me is that it's not that experience isn't unique to people who have immigrated or emigrated, that sense of not belonging is something that is much more universal. We may have different stories that are backing up our feeling and our emotional experience. And if people going through high school and middle school, experience similar kinds of wounds in trying to belong within their own tribe, so to speak. So Rosalind says the sense of belonging is like being validated by the tribe to prove your worth. And it's very interesting dynamic, Rosalind, for sure, when you're talking about being validated by others. Either you're one of the cool kids or you're not. You're an insider or you're an outsider. And good morning, Lisa. Welcome. We're talking about belonging and how this seems to be a universal story where we engage in a quest for belonging. And with the situation, for instance, with these folks who were, good morning, Isabel, welcome. With these folks who emigrated to or were immigrants in this country, a lot of the foundation of that story had to do with the fact that they were immigrants. Whereas what I notice is that this is very much a human story of not belonging and trying to belong. Welcome, Kimberly. So good to have you here with us this morning. We're talking about belonging. And Isabel, it's so good to have you here with us this morning too. I realize I just said welcome and not the rest. And it's great to have all of you who are joining us here. If you are wanting to write comments, please go to the Facebook page for Enlightened World Network. And if you put your comments there or in the Enlightened World Network YouTube channel, then I'll be able to see them. And that's why if you're putting in comments and I'm not responding, it's just because I don't see them, not because you're being ignored. Anyway, this quest for belonging and this sense of otherness, I think, is pretty much a universal human experience. And I find that fascinating that in so many respects we experience ourselves as outsiders, or we do all kinds of things to be on the inside. We mold ourselves, we shape ourselves, we act differently. The experience of junior high school and high school is just such an environment for that kind of thing, and cliquishness and social acceptance. And it's so fascinating to me when we might even be experiencing this quest for belonging within our very own families. Maybe we feel like the black sheep. I suspect that there are a number of black sheep here in this contingent that gathers to have these conversations. I know for sure I was definitely a black sheep, and that was really, really painful. So Lisa says, I was overweight. School was a form of torture for me. Worst experience. So I can totally relate to that, Lisa. Just that how brutal school is in a social context, where if you're different in whatever way, you get tortured for it. And Kimberly says, Lisa, oh dear, that's not fair. So sorry, beautiful. And Lisa, me too. It's just a bad passage that so many of us go through, and hopefully find our way to self-acceptance and to be shifting the lens from this external acceptance, because we are social beings. So and we rely on others for our survival to some degree or another. And welcome, Gia. So good to have you here with us. It's been a little while. Great to have you back. We're talking about belonging. And Kimberly says, we all belong. People are so ignorant. Well, it's true. People can be very cruel to others and to themselves. And in this awareness around belonging, I think we get to be more circumspect, to say, what is it we're belonging to? And oftentimes people will turn themselves inside out and do things that are not in alignment with who they are or what they believe in order to fit in to a group. And I think we've all witnessed groupthink and probably been subject to it in one way or another. And it's interesting that a group can have an energy of its own that kind of consumes people as part of it. I mean, if we remember the riots, you know, what happens is something sparks some violence, and there's this energy of the crowd, and then the crowd itself gains momentum. And it's so Gia says a sense of belonging is so crucial to humankind, I believe. Well, I think a sense of belonging is really a very important thing, and we get to look at what we're willing to sacrifice in order to belong, or what it is that we're trying to belong to. Lisa says a group easily becomes a mob. Exactly. And that it's not hard to get swept up into that mentality. So much of what we talk about on these morning musings is conscious awareness, awareness of what our thoughts are, awareness of what we become complicit with by our lack of awareness or by our lack of questioning, and to be discovering what it means to be an independent thinker and to be able to think for ourselves, because we are so subject to all kinds of programming and social conditioning on all different kinds of levels. So Rosalind says, I perceive this in the workplace too. Absolutely 100%. Simply doing your job alone by itself is not enough. There's a culture and norms. There's a dress code. The out loud talkative ones steer story time around the cooler and proving productiveness and showing progress, such as annual reviews. So the social environment, to your point, that's an important point, Rosalind, is that when we are working in a culture, when we are working on site at a place, there is a culture and there are norms, and people who don't comply with those norms in some way, shape, or form can be marginalized. And it's very interesting, you know, like it didn't occur to me up until this very moment to be thinking of humans as pack animals. You know, we are biologically, we're animals, right? We keep forgetting this. We think that we're separate and that we're above all of that. But when we look at some of our behaviors, we can see like it is sort of a pack mentality. in so many ways. And animals will attack and brutalize the runt, and sometimes even kill the runt in a litter, for instance. And you know, I kind of see that echoed in our behavior when we look at belonging, when we look at how we get along with others and how we interact with others, and people who share our beliefs and people who don't. And I guess we there's a transition available to us that comes with more independent thought, with questioning the foundation of things, which is what we come back to over and over again. What are the assumptions that are driving these behaviors? And when we look at belonging, so often the experience is that we're less than, that there's something wrong with us because we're not accepted. And I think, like, for me, as I'm just thinking this through as I'm discussing it with you, but I was different, and people let me know that I was different, like that I didn't really fit in lots of ways. And as a result of that, I started thinking about things that most people just don't think about. I suspect that there are a number of you that are listening or engaging in these conversations that have had similar experiences. You didn't fit in, so you got to be looking at things differently. Maybe you looked at things first differently because you and then didn't fit in, and then that made you look at things even more differently, perhaps. So Rosalind says, belonging in a romantic relationship or friendship, are we essentially looking for ourselves? Well, I think that that's a really good question, you know, to say that's where this whole conversation is going, is that ultimately what we get to discover is a sense of self-esteem and value that is not based on externalities, and that brings us back to a connection with ourselves and self-acceptance. And when we have self-acceptance, then belonging isn't as much of an issue, right? When we trust ourselves, when we have reached some level of wholeness, then it's okay to be, we have the greater resilience to be confronting or weathering or integrating the fact that perhaps we don't fit in. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's so funny, years ago, my nephew, I don't even know how old he was, but at one point he said something like, "You are so weird." And I said, "You say that like it's a bad thing, right?" Like, because I had different values, I had different priorities, I think about different things. And when I had, fortunately, in that situation, I had gotten to a point where I was at peace enough with me so as not to have to, not to feel that I needed to justify myself or apologize for myself. It's interesting because I recently had another encounter around that very thing, where I said, I'm not going to apologize for my beliefs and my perspectives. And I got the response, well, maybe you should. And I was like, oh boy, how crazy is the world where we require everyone to think the way that we think, where we require everyone to toe the line, where difference is villainized. It's interesting because I know that I don't have children, and I don't have children obviously in school since I don't have children. And the younger people that I know in my life have gone beyond, aren't in school anymore. So I'm not directly privy to it, but I know that there's a growing awareness and supposed tolerance for difference, for difference around cognitive process, around sexuality, around race, that there's a greater awareness, I think, in efforts for tolerance and inclusion. And I think that impulse is an important, or that transformation toward inclusion is such an essential thing for our continued evolution, to find a way to be building bridges to acceptance rather than othering. And so this notion of belonging, ultimately, the greatest belonging is when we are belonging to ourselves, when we have ownership of ourselves. We talk about that belongs to me, meaning I own that. And when we look at belonging, when we own ourselves, all aspects of ourselves, then we have a greater capacity to be navigating a broader world. Lisa says, my boyfriend was just in here listening when I told him the subject and said, I've never belonged. He tells me I need to change because everyone else can't be wrong. Well, that's not true. Everyone else can be wrong. And it isn't really a matter of right or wrong. Oh my gosh. So here's the thing. Look at what we've done in the world. Look at the way the world is operating. Look at the fundamental assumptions of acquisition and consumerism and unconsciousness about our impact in the world. And thankfully, there's a growing contingent of people who care about such things, but there are so many unquestioned assumptions that are lethal in the long term. So it's interesting when people with new ideas, the whole world believed, or the Western world believed, the world was flat until it wasn't, right? And people were actually tortured and put to death for believing that the world was round, or that the earth was round, right? So it's majority does not make truth, and majority does not make right or wrong either. And so, Lisa, maybe you can talk about the flat earth, round earth conversation to bring that about. And also, you know, there were times in the history of this country where people believed that it was okay to enslave other people. So, you know, that was what everybody believed, or that women weren't as intelligent as men and women shouldn't have a right to vote. And, you know, there are still countries where people believe that women are second-class citizens and are treated like chattel. So, you know, majority does not make truth or righteousness, for that matter. Rosalind says, does a narcissist have the drive to belong? I've read that their sense of self is at the expense of others, deferring their own truths to cultivate the narcissist's desires. You know, it's interesting you're talking about narcissists. I've been watching some YouTube videos around narcissists, having been intimately related to some. And I think that there are lots of compensatory measures to, maybe in response to not belonging. I don't know. I am still trying to wrap my head around that whole dynamic, although I see that behavior in people that I'm intimately related with, or to. Let's see. Isabel says, I relate to this. How I grew up from pain is I don't engage in groups anymore. I accepted being different and my own identity. No need for approval, but not engaging to the point of vulnerability that other people can treat me less, besides the ones who are in my life, in my heart. So Isabel, I noticed too, like I feel your pain, and I experienced a lot of pain growing up as well, and became more strongly independent as a result. And one-on-one is great for me, and groups, again, there's this whole dynamic that I navigate with great care as well. So I think that when we are more whole, we can allow ourselves to be more vulnerable, and also we can allow ourselves to be more discerning as to when and where that's appropriate, and be selective, be discerning. And I think that that's an important skill, you know, where we don't need people to like us, and we can gravitate to people where there's a greater synergy, you know, that we don't need to be trying to prove our worth to people that are on a different wavelength, different path. So anyway, I know this is a deep topic. There's probably a lot more to discuss, but that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and the Enlightened World Network YouTube channel. So please check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, EWN One with the Earth, Enlightened World Living. And I am so grateful to you for you sharing your hearts and your feelings and your thoughts. Rosalind says, blessings for all, our own journey for navigating our identity roles and truths. Here, Rosalind. Lisa says, I actually got myself a sweatshirt that says, it's okay if you don't like me. Not everyone has good taste. I love it, Lisa. And so on that note, I so appreciate you. And I look forward to these mornings together. And I hope to see you back here again really, really soon. And until then, so much love.